Well, good afternoon to you. 306 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. So great to have you in with us today. We've got Evita Duffy Alfonso joining us from the Federalist at 3:30. We'll talk to her about the media's freakout over Donald Trump's expected win in Iowa yesterday. They were panicking over something that normal people sort of expected. Matt Whitaker will be with us at 4:30. He was on stage last night with Donald Trump as he gave that victory speech. Steve Malloy is here at 5 o'clock. We'll talk to him as those globalist freaks gather in Davos. And then Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of Texas, will be with us at 5:30. The Biden administration now ready to go to war with the Lone Star State over protecting just 2.5 miles of border. If any border is protected, that's a bad thing in the eyes of the Biden administration. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Would be grateful for your contributions today, as always. Donald Trump, last night, Iowa, after his resounding and truly historic victory.
Well, I want to thank everybody. This has been some period of time, and most importantly, we want to thank the great people of Iowa. Thank you. We love you all. What a turnout, what a crowd. And I really think this is time now for everybody, our country, to come together. We want to come together.
Yeah, we want to come together. It's time to come together. And, of course, what Trump is referring to is coming together inside of the Republican Party. A lot of divisions in the party, some divisions, not a tremendous amount, but some divisions, especially among fervent supporters of both Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley and somewhat Vivek Ramaswamy. And what Trump wants to do is overcome those differences and, of course, conclude this primary and say, look, I'm the nominee. Let's get behind this campaign and let's take this country back from Joe Biden and the Democrats who have made it so much worse in these few short years. It's honestly a compelling case for sure. And Trump definitely had the numbers to begin making it last night. 51% of the electorate in the Iowa caucuses went for Trump yesterday. No one else came even close. Ron DeSantis was number 2 in this race with 21.2% of the vote. Nikki Haley, number 3. She was threatening a second-place finish, didn't get there. 19.1% of the vote. Ramaswamy finishing, I guess you'd say, a distant fourth here. 7.7% of the vote. Vivek wasted no time in saying that he was suspending his campaign. Remember, he had spent a lot of time in Iowa. He had visited every single county, all 99 of them in Iowa, twice. So he had done the full Grassley 2 times over. Here he is.
Now, this is a campaign founded on speaking the truth. Not just when it's easy, but when it's hard. Not just to the Democrats, but to our own side. And not just to other campaigns and candidacies, but to ours. And so I will stick to the truth tonight. The first hard truth, and this one's hard for me. I got to admit this. But we've looked at it every which way, and I think it is true that we did not achieve the surprise that we wanted to deliver tonight. And I think that that's just a hard fact that we're going to have to accept as a campaign. And the question then is, what do we do that is right for our country? And so Purv and I, we actually didn't make this contingency plan before everybody told us to. We said, no, we're not doing that. But we talked about it tonight. We took a little bit of time in our apartment in Des Moines before coming here to make some hard choices. And I wanted to make a couple of announcements tonight to get the business out of the way. And then I want to tell you where we're going. As of this moment, we are going to suspend this presidential campaign. And this is going to have to be, there's no path for me to be the next president absent things that we don't want to see happen in this country.
Very interesting. Now, a guy who's normally cool, calm, and collected, always seemed to have a smile on his face. He sounded emotional at the conclusion of this, and hard to see, hard to, to think it would be any other way. He just did a marathon in the state of Iowa. Over many, many days, ran a long, I think, productive campaign in terms of issues. And, now he brings it to a conclusion. The reality, of course, is that most of the people who would be inclined to support Vivek because of his ideas already do support Trump. And so for that reason, he didn't have a tremendous amount of space, as you look at what Kamala Harris might call the Venn diagram of his support. Many of those people, Trump supporters, Ramaswamy, of course, recognized that, and he announced last night immediately that he had just gotten off the phone with Donald Trump and offered him his endorsement.
And earlier tonight, I called Donald Trump to tell him that I congratulated him on his victory, and now going forward, he will have my full endorsement for the presidency. And I think we're going to do the right thing for this country.
There he is. Okay, so he said he gave Trump his full endorsement. Additionally, Trump responded to all of this last night in his own victory speech.
I also want to congratulate Vivek because he did a hell of a job. He came from 0, and he's got a big percent, probably 8%, almost 8%, and that's an amazing job. They all did. They're all very smart people, very capable people.
Yeah, so you notice one of the themes of Trump's speech last night was that he was very gracious about his opponents after, of course, some very tough Truth Social posts that he's had in the past few weeks, especially the past few days, going after all of them, to include Vivek Ramaswamy. He was only gracious last night in talking about even Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley, who at this hour are still in the race.
I want to congratulate Ron and Nikki for having a good time together. We're all having a good time together. And I think they both actually did very well. I really do. I think they both did very well. We don't even know what the outcome of second place is. And
well, yeah, and of course that ended up, by the time we all saw it, it ended up today. Ron DeSantis is number 2, Nikki Haley number 3. There was some drama, of course, about the way the results were announced last night. And I would say I agree with some of the criticisms here that if you're standing in line at a caucus and you have not yet voted, if the entire caucus hasn't yet voted, how is it that the media are already reporting results? Now, normally, the way it works, if you're not familiar, is that typically in conventional elections, the media does not make calls based on the data that they're ingesting until the polls close in any particular state. Iowa is a bit unique insofar as the way the media handles it is when the doors close for the caucuses at 7 p.m. and everybody's in the room and they've already indicated one way or another as they talk to the media, I guess it's entrance polls, who they intend to support. The media go ahead and use that data. But people hadn't actually voted, and so people with their cell phones are in those rooms and they're being notified that the state has already been called for Donald Trump, and none of the people in some of these rooms had even cast their ballots yet. So the point of the media call being held off in a normal election is to stop other people from being influenced. Remember, of course, back in 2016, there was a tremendous scandal, not around a media call, but instead around somebody affiliated with Ted Cruz's campaign or connected to it, making the claim that Ben Carson had dropped out of the race in Iowa. That was not true. And that led, of course, to Donald Trump referring to Ted Cruz as lying Ted and attacking him as the primary process moved along for what was done to Ben Carson. And the idea is that you don't want to convince voters that if they're not voting for Trump or whatever, that their vote is pointless. Oh, it's already been called for Trump, so I don't have to vote, or I'm not voting for that guy, or they're dissuaded. Basically don't interfere in the election is the point. Here's how CBS reported on it this morning. They were kind of going over the way this was all reported out by the media.
Hey guys in New York, as I send it back to you, I do have to point something out, not for nothing. The decision last night by the AP, many news organizations, including CBS, to project a win for Donald Trump just 30 minutes into the night while some people were still caucusing. Most people were still caucusing. It did not go well. It did not go over well inside the site where I was. I wanted to get some more information. I did. So based on what I know here, our call was because of information that we share with other news organizations that is gathered by the precinct pool reporters who go in person to caucus sites. They poll Iowans as they enter about who they're going to vote for. We vet the information, and then we make that call, that projection. While there is a process, and many had caucused already, and the caucuses had begun statewide, it meant that in my particular location, and this is true for other locations as well, no one had in fact cast a ballot when news alerts started going off on people's phones, and just all the energy drained out of the room. I have to say there's got to be a better way to do it than that.
Yeah, I mean, or at least pick a lane. I mean, if you want to start making those calls from now on without waiting for polls to close, just do that, news organizations, or vice versa, don't call them until all of the votes are in, until the polls close. Just pick a rule and go with it. Let's see here. We had Ron DeSantis also responding to all of this last night. He gave a speech in Iowa and says that his campaign is still alive. Now, if he had ended up in third place, I wonder how different this speech would have been. He ended up in second, and here's what he said.
But they were just so excited about the fact that they were predicting that we wouldn't be able to get our ticket punched here out of Iowa. But I can tell you, because of your support, in spite of all of that they threw at us, everyone against us, we've got our ticket punched out of Iowa.
Now, Ron DeSantis, of course, has some challenges ahead as he goes off to New Hampshire and South Carolina. Those, if you look at the polling there, he's not doing that well. In fact, Nikki Haley has noticed that as well. Her remarks last night were about that polling. She says the race is now a two-person race, commentary on the fact that she's a woman, not a two-man race. So she used the politically correct assessment here. And she also, it is kind of interesting. Like, she came in third, and here she is claiming it's now a two-person race.
The pundits will analyze the results from every angle. We get that. But when you look at how we're doing in New Hampshire, in South Carolina, and beyond, I can safely say tonight, Iowa made this Republican primary a two-person race.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it's still not much of one. Even with her second-place status in these polls, she is a very distant second behind Trump in all of these surveys in all of these states. Trump is cleaning up. Now, who is he cleaning up with? I got a chance to look at some of the demographic data today to kind of figure out why is Trump succeeding here. And the answer to that question is, boy, if you don't have a college degree in America, chances are, huge chances are, you support Donald Trump to be the next president of the United States. In fact, in the Iowa caucuses, 62% of voters without a college degree backed Trump. We've seen this story before in Trump support in the past, but that is probably the biggest delineating factor out of any. If you have some college experience or less, you are very likely to support Donald Trump for president of the United States. It's a huge number. Just 32% of voters with a college degree backed Trump yesterday in Iowa. That was still the biggest number for Trump got the biggest number among college graduates. But outside of that, Nikki Haley had 30% support. Ron DeSantis had 29% support among that same cohort. It's just not true. The no college, without a college degree, that number is not even close. Trump gets 62% support there. Haley 13, DeSantis 17, according to the AP's polling on the subject. So that was one of the biggest factors. Another one that really stands out, and Breitbart has a great report up on this today from the same AP data, is that Trump dominated among women. And in fact, he did better with women than he did with men, if you can believe it. 50% of the men who voted yesterday chose Trump as their candidate. They split their votes otherwise. 52% of the women who voted yesterday went for Trump. 52%. So slightly more. And it is interesting. Among men, their second choice was Nikki Haley. That was 21%. And then Ron DeSantis at 20%. Women, much more likely to choose DeSantis as number two. It was 52 for Trump, 23 for DeSantis, and just 17 for Haley. So I find that fascinating. Women not quite as activated by Nikki Haley as the men are, apparently, in Iowa. And then another big standout piece of data is the ages here. Young voters very likely to support Donald Trump. And just to remind you, we have seen this in national survey data too. Young people are now opting for Trump over Biden. Isn't that fascinating? The youth vote, we see it in a bunch of surveys moving in that direction. And I know what's in the back of your head right now is all of the left's election rigging schemes. I got it. And trust me, another one's playing out today in Manhattan as we speak. We'll get into that. But among young voters, 52% of them yesterday in Iowa supported Trump over any of his opponents. The only age group that had more support for Trump was 45-64. 45-64. That was 55% of the vote in that age group went to Trump. But everybody else was pretty close, too. 30 to 44, 46% of that cohort. And then 65 and up, 49%. So anyway, Trump is doing very well among a variety of these age groups. Now, the media are furious about this, again, despite the fact that it was as predictable as the sunrise at this point. The media are furious about this. And one of the things they're furious about is the racial composition of Iowa. The left-wing media hates white voters. Hates white voters. Some people really hate them in the left-wing media. Over on MSNBC, they hire people that have that attitude specifically. And they were saying it last night on the network as they refused CNN and MSNBC to air Trump's speech, and then simultaneously attacked the voters of Iowa for their skin color and their belief in Jesus. Hold tight. I've got more coming up for you, including our conversation straight ahead with Evita Duffy Alfonso over at the Federalist over the media's freakout last night over that election victory for Donald Trump in Iowa.
A recent study showed that one of the top reasons people don't go to the dentist on a regular basis is due to dental fear. Well, I can relate to that because my experience with the dentist when I was a kid were not the most comfortable, and I had a big fear of the dentist. But for the past 7 years, I've been going to see Dr. Rob and Dr. Deb at Bethesda Sedation Dentistry. That fear and anxiety is gone. They're amazing dentists. They helped me overcome my dental fear, and honestly, it's been life-changing. Their approach with me was compassionate and non-judgmental. Everything's talked about in advance. It's all 100% permission-based. They proceed at the speed you're comfortable with. So trust me, if you have any dental fear at all and nagging tooth pain, if you're interested in sedation dentistry or just looking for a great dentist, call my dentist, Bethesda Sedation Dentistry, 301-530-2434. That's 301-530-2434, or visit BethesdaSedationDentistry.com. Bethesda Sedation Dentistry. Sleep, dream, smile.
Hey, good afternoon to you. It is 3:35 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, we've got the former acting attorney general under President Trump, Matt Whitaker, will be with us. He was on stage last night with the former and perhaps future president of the United States, Donald Trump, as Trump was celebrating that victory in Iowa. We'll talk to Steve Malloy at 5 o'clock about all of the globalists who are assembling to rob you of your liberty. In Davos, Switzerland right now, they say they can control the weather if only you give them more power. And Ken Paxton will be here at 5:30, the Attorney General of Texas. Texas is now squaring off against the Biden administration when it comes to securing our border. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Panic last night in the American news media, CNN and MSNBC, both cutting away from Donald Trump's remarks. MSNBC refused to air Trump's victory speech at all. CNN cuts away during his remarks last night. They don't trust their viewers to be able to hear the words coming out of the mouth of a presidential candidate that the networks don't like and to make up their own minds about him. And that's very evident in their editorial decisions. Here to discuss what happened last night on those major networks and across the media is Evita Duffy Alfonso, a staff writer for The Federalist. Great to have you with us, Evita.
Thanks for having me.
Were there any trends you noticed among the press last night as the results were coming in?
It was frankly, I should say I was astounded by what the corporate media did last night, but I'm not. They essentially said, we can't air Trump's full remarks because either he's a liar or we can't filter it through our own political narrative, so it's too dangerous for you to listen to. They've essentially named themselves the arbiters of truth, and they've accused Trump of wrongthink, and so we're not allowed to hear what he has to say. And the remarks from the winner of the Iowa caucuses is worth hearing. The American people deserve to know what he had to say last night. They refused to let us hear it, but they did air the full speech of Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis, which is astounding because they were losers. Why are we hearing from the losers and not the person who actually won last night?
It's a great question. Rachel Maddow is the most effective and highest paid host at MSNBC, and she summarized the network's attitudes towards Trump's speeches last night this way.
If we are worried about the rise of authoritarianism in this country, we are worried about potential rise of fascism in this country. If we're worried about our democracy falling to an authoritarian and potentially fascist form of government, the leader who is trying to do that is part of that equation. But people wanting that is a much bigger part of that equation. Right. And the American electorate is made up of two major parties. One of those parties has been flirting with extremism on the ultra-right for a very long time. They've brought them in a way that they haven't been central to Republican electoral politics ever before, and I know because I've been studying this. But once you have radicalized one major party so that those are the preferences of the people who adhere to your party, the leader's interchangeable. And yes, Trumpism is sometimes what we call it. MAGA movement is probably a better way to do it. But there is an authoritarian movement inside Republican politics that isn't being bamboozled by Trump. They are pushing Trump to get more and more extreme, because the more extreme things he says, the more they adhere to him. And that is coming from a very large proportion of the American right that adheres to the Republican Party. And that's why this is a Republican Party problem more than it is the problem of one man and his leadership.
Okay, so that audio came from a different portion. I meant to play audio specifically of Rachel Maddow saying that they can't air untrue things on the air, so that which is hilarious considering they aired the Trump-Russia collusion hoax for years. But she also said, you heard in that audio clip, that it's not just Trump that's the problem, it's the voters. So here she is, Evita, condemning authoritarianism, but saying the real problem with our system are the voters.
I love that you actually played that clip without having planned it, because I think it shows what's wrong with the media. They're so bad at their job. They can't understand why people support Trump. Instead, they say, well, all of these voters in Iowa and the rest of the country who are polling that they, are in support of President Trump, they're racist, they're fascist, they're anti-democracy. They can't understand in their minds why anyone would vote for him. And it's actually because of people like Rachel Maddow that Republicans are gravitating toward Trump. The electorate is sick of hearing from elites in media, in D.C., that they're stupid, that they're racist, that their concerns about things like the invasion at the border or the sexualization of their children is not worth considering. So, they are sick of that.
Evita, on this idea that people can't see Trump's speeches, that's the feeling at MSNBC and CNN. They say we can't air these because he says untrue things. And we aren't allowed to show you untrue things, they claim. Of course, it's ridiculous given all of the untrue things that have crossed both of those networks to advance the left's agenda. But that said, if I were to ask Rachel Maddow right now, why is it that MSNBC's control room can watch this speech, but MSNBC's viewers can't? What would she say?
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, the reason that she says that is because she thinks the American people are stupid, and so does everybody else in that executive boardroom, and the people in the control room who are making these calls. They believe that the people are not smart enough to decide for themselves what is and isn't true. And what's so ironic is that's what authoritarians do. Authoritarians are the ones who say, your minds are too simple. We're going to have to tell you what to see and what to think. Rachel Maddow and everybody else at MSNBC and CNN are the Orwellian elites who have really departed from any of the journalistic ethics that they claim to adhere to, any of the democracy ethics that they claim to care so much about. It's a complete departure in America from what used to be normal. And I think that they think we're stupid, and I think that's why people are really gravitating toward Trump in the first place.
And meanwhile, so MSNBC didn't air it, as I noted, and I saw in your coverage that CNN cut away from the speech. Why did they cut away? Why did they air just a portion of it, and what was their rationale for cutting away?
Yeah, so Trump started to talk about the invasion at the border, the human rights crisis that we have at the border, and criticizing Joe Biden. And Jake Tapper cut him off and said, oh, we can't, here's Trump continuing his anti-immigration rhetoric. Essentially, they didn't want to air Trump talking about what Joe Biden has done at our southern border. They didn't want their viewers to hear an alternative perspective without them being able to first filter it and put it in the context that they see fit. It is truly, I mean, they're not even really trying to hide the fact that they're propaganda press. They are doing the bidding of the Democratic Party. Anybody who comes in to criticize Joe Biden will be silenced and shut down, just like Trump was last night.
It's amazing. All right, so there's also this, the assessment by Joy Reid over on MSNBC of the voters of Iowa. She explained last night's results based on the race and religion of Iowa's voters. Take a listen to this. MSNBC has not suspended this woman who said all of this last night on the network.
New Hampshire. And I think to the point that you made, Steph, I mean, it's the elephant in the room. She's still a brown lady that's got to try to win in a party that is deeply anti-immigrant and which accepts the notion that you can say immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country. She's getting, birthered by Donald Trump. And I don't care how much the donor class likes her, which will ramp up a lot, the better she does in New Hampshire. So it's still a challenge. I don't see how she becomes the nominee of that party with Donald Trump still around. I can't picture it happening. Maybe it could happen. Ron DeSantis' only argument for staying in it is he's the white guy, that he can still make the appeal to white evangelists.
How did we get to this point where you have a television host sitting on a prominent cable news network denouncing the voters of the opposite party, obviously Joy Reid's a Democrat, denouncing those voters and saying that it's because of their skin color and their religion that they didn't, go wild for Nikki Haley?
I have to say again, these people are so bad at their job. Her job is to be a political analyst, and she has no concept of why people oppose Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley's a warmonger. Nikki Haley, has this giant donor class that is pushing the neocon old right that is not representative of where the current Republican Party is at right now. That's why people oppose Nikki Haley, not because she's Indian or because she's a Christian. That's literally something that Joy Reid said. She said, she's racist probably because the electorate is filled with white evangelicals. Nikki Haley is a Methodist. I mean, this is just, it's stupidity coming from CNN and MSNBC, and I think it's actually weaponized stupidity. I think they know the truth. They know that's not why people oppose Nikki Haley. It's not because they're racist. It's because she represents the uniparty. But they like the uniparty. They like what Nikki Haley represents. They actually, some of them might even prefer her to Joe Biden. And that's why they're supporting her and they're lying to their viewers when they make these just ridiculous political analysts.
Yes. And once again, it seems to me that it's a case of projection. It's not Iowa's voters who are racist. It's Joy Reid who's being racist about Iowa's voters. It's the same deal with assessing authoritarianism. It's not the right or Donald Trump that's being authoritarian. It's the left that's trying to prevent voters from being able to even make a decision on their own. And in fact, trying to prevent his name from appearing on ballots. That's the authoritarian impulse, and yet they're projecting here.
I think they're nervous because Joe Biden is not a popular candidate. Joe Biden is losing ground, especially with young people, as this Israel-Hamas conflict goes on, as the economy continues to get worse. And now they're thinking, we've now set a precedent, a really negative precedent that we can go after former presidents, his former cabinet members, anybody who was supportive of the former president. And if they lose this next election cycle, they're worried, and they should be, because they have done some truly evil things to change our once democratic republic into really something foreign, something that you see in places like Cuba and North Korea. This is banana republic territory that they have pushed us into, and they're worried, and I think that they should be.
One other trend I want to hit with you about the way the media has covered Trump. I've noticed over the course of the past year that every time survey data comes out that shows that Trump is popular among Republican voters, the media will say something like, despite all of the indictments against him. In my view, they're getting it exactly backwards, that the indictments against him have actually helped solidify support for Trump. Am I right about that?
Yes. This is something that I've been saying for a long time. They had Trump derangement. They couldn't help themselves. They had allies, these rogue prosecutors. They had judges, political judges who were willing to prosecute and go after Trump. But what's now happened is it's had the exact opposite effect. It's backfired on them, and the people have realized how wrong this is, how backward it is, and have actually supported Trump, maybe not necessarily because they love Trump, but because they are angry at the election interference that has happened and is continuing to happen on the part of Democrats and the left.
I mean, the election rigging is explicit and it's out of control. We're watching it happen all around us. And if you can't open your eyes to that, you don't deserve to either assess or especially be in American politics. Thank you very much, Evita Duffy Alfonso over at the Excellent Federalist. Great to talk to you today. Thank you so much.
Thanks. That's,
again, Evita. And, this has become standard. The idea that Joy Reid goes on television, if we were talking about any other racial composition here, if a white person was saying black voters are doing this because they don't like white people, it's like the craziest thing. She'd be suspended. She would be fired from the network. But no, instead she's rewarded. She's put onto their primetime coverage. She's asked to give her assessment of how all of this went down. She said, yeah, the real problem is white evangelicals. Nikki Haley came in a close third place behind Ron DeSantis yesterday in Iowa. And among the reasons why she prevailed were, first of all, we did see reports that Democrats were party switching to support her. There is a bit of an operation underway to support Nikki Haley among left-wingers to try and throw the Republican primary into chaos. That's not a secret. Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn, is one of the biggest funders of Nikki Haley's campaign. And he is a hardcore Democrat. He has promised that he will do anything he possibly can to stop Trump from returning to the Oval Office. Guess what that includes? Giving money to Nikki Haley's campaign to bolster her to try and make the Republican primary messy enough that it damages the eventual nominee. That is what he wants, or prevents him from becoming the nominee. That's what Reid Hoffman's up to. You know what else he's up to? He's funding the lawsuits against Donald Trump. That man you've been hearing about it on our news breaks, how Donald Trump right now today was in jury selection for yet another trial against this columnist, E. Jean Carroll, who alleged that he had raped her. That's the claim that she's made. It's another locked in yet another court case over that allegation. And it was Reid Hoffman who funded the entire suit. He was funding the lawsuit against Trump because he wants to stop him. He did a podcast. It was in 2023. He talked to a woman called Kara Swisher, and he announced outright that he was spending as much money as he could to stop Trump, to take him down. He's meddling in the election. And here he is supporting Nikki Haley by way of her super PAC. They accepted the money with open arms. It was $250,000. It was written about in the New York Times that Reid Hoffman was giving all of this cash to Nikki. In fact, the New York Times didn't even dress it up at all. They didn't pretend he was anything but a Democrat. Top Democratic donor, Reid Hoffman, gives $250,000 to a Nikki Haley super PAC, they said. And yeah, the goal was to stop Trump. And it's the same goal throughout all of this. And this guy's a huge, we talk a lot about Soros, the money he gives to try and distort the country and take down Trump and advance his globalist agenda. We perhaps should be talking a lot more about Reid Hoffman. Reid Hoffman, a lot of money, billionaire guy, who is financing some of these very deranged efforts that are hurting our country in very meaningful ways. Very meaningful ways. And so today, right after the Iowa caucuses, Donald Trump locked up in court yet again today because of the expenditures by Democratic donors and the coordination being done at the national level by that party, which seems to mostly flow out of the White House. How many of these prosecutions have we seen have contact points with the White House directly? Oh, in the visitor logs. Oh, look who's appearing. It's the prosecutor. It's the counsel. It's over and over and over again. So as I mentioned a moment ago with Evita, if you don't have your eyes open to the rigging that's going on, then I don't know. There's no more evidence that can be put in front of you. They're trying to remove Trump from the ballot right now in multiple states. That is explicitly ballot rigging.